when I went into my high school years, which was another craziness in itself. Where I live, the training film for the neighborhood was The Godfather. And
Okay.
I don't say that lightly.
Tired of the negativity on the news? Ready to focus on creation and make some moves? The world is our canvas. It's not even a fight. Artists, it's time to take flight. Welcome to Super Artists. I'm your host, David Carus. On today's episode, I have the founder of Routine Patrol Coffee, the co-founder of Goodfellas Pizza, and actor extraordinaire, I have Marc Cosentino.
Marc, how's it going, man?
It's going good. Some intro. I hope I can live up to it, David. While we're having our interview, I'm going to make some Routine Patrol coffee.
I love it, man. Well, we're about to get right into the whole Routine Patrol story that you have, but it's probably anything but routine, I'd have to say. Let's go back, man. Let's get back in the DeLorean, go back in time. I want to hear your story. Starting from the beginning, you're pretty much like Captain America. You're just a kid from Brooklyn, right?
It was Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, across the street from the Verrazano Bridge, and a place where we used to hang out. We used to call it the Girders, which is the under part of the bridge. And when we were kids, we would hang out there, and we'd climb under the Verrazano Bridge. We'd walk out over the water. We'd hang off. Like a lot of stuff was in that movie Saturday Night Fever with John Travolta.
Okay.
Well, that was what we used to do. That's where they got the ideas for the movie.
Tell me about the folks, the parents. Like what did they do?
My father was a sergeant in the New York City Transit Police, an ex-Marine. My mom is and was at that time an incredible artist. She actually taught a little bit in school, art school, painter, and into music and creating. I had both ends of the spectrum, so I always wanted to be creative, drawing and painting and singing and play acting mostly, and pretending. And then I had the police ex-Marine on the other side, so I had the ability to go out there and be tough, even though I wasn't really considering myself a tough guy.
Did you see yourself as going into entertainment and being an actor and pursuing that whole thing? Like, was that the path that you saw for yourself?
Not at all. That wasn't the path. And, and I don't even know if it really is the path. It's just part of it. I like to think of what I am and what I do just as living, and part of that is to really enjoy everything I do and to experience it, So I try to put that in everything I'm involved in, whether it be driving in my hot rod, pouring a cup of coffee, making a slice of pizza, whatever I'm doing, I just try to really be into it and enjoy myself.
So true artist at life.
You know what? Yeah, I guess you could call it that. I mean, I do enjoy it, and I enjoy wherever I go. And my biggest pleasure in life is just meeting people from any walk of life. Anywhere I go, I'm always talking to people and finding out about them and seeing what drives them.
So were you doing that as a kid? Were you real talkative and just getting into conversations with people in the stores and everywhere you went?
Always, but that was part of our upbringing. I mean, that was really, now that you mention it, because it's something I feel is missing, and I try to relate it to my younger kids, that without all the frills of internet and video games and all this nonsense that they have today, which just takes away the whole experience, we would sit around, that's the Routine Patrol water boiling for the French press. Can you hear that being poured in there? Oh, it smells so good, so rich, so deep. Man, Colombian organic coffee. Anyway, so to get back to what I was saying, so the biggest part of our entertainment was hanging out talking, whether it was with our family, and especially on Sundays, the whole family would get together. And I'm talking about the kids, the extended family, aunts and uncles, cousins, every Sunday at my grandmother's house for a feast every week in and week out. And the holidays weren't much different. That's how much food she would make, But the majority of the time, there would be a group of us between maybe 4 and 10 people taking turns sitting at the table talking, and about anything, or entertaining, or telling stories, or telling jokes. And I really appreciated that. And like for me, now that I'm thinking about it, talking to you, actually, when I wrote that book, Routine Patrol, one of the things I talk about is having a story. And that's the value of the experiences to me. It's like collecting all these stories and all these things I've been involved in and being able to share them with people.
What about school? Like compared to what was happening at home with everyone talking and stuff like that, like going to school, how did you find that experience?
Well, the Catholic school system back in the 60s was a little rough. The strict discipline, the corporal punishment, the sit there and shut up, do what you're told type of thing. That was rough, and that was like in the early 60s. And then towards the later 60s into the 70s, there were a couple progressive teachers, I remember one in particular used to let us basically put our chairs wherever we want. It was like being at a prison. I guess this kind of dates it, because I remember one thing in particular. I remember getting a cassette tape and smashing it and pulling out all the tape and making it into a big knot in a big ball and sticking it on a piece of paper and writing on top of it Watergate, which was my viewpoint of what was happening. So I guess it was 1972.
Okay, so it sounds like you also had a little bit of a political mindset from an early age too.
Well, interesting, because my uncle was an artist and he was a hippie, but he was an engineer. He was brilliant. He worked for IBM and grew his hair really long, because during that time there was a lot of rebellion going on. And they gave him the ultimatum: either he cuts his hair or he's fired. And he walked away from that job, And I used to hang out with him and my brother, and he used to have a place in a pretty rough neighborhood in Bushwick, and I remember things like, if he'd get out of the car somewhere, he'd give me a bayonet. He'd say, "Here, hold on to this in case anybody comes." I'd be like, "Oh, man." As a kid, I loved going to his shop because we had the freedom there. He had this big metalworking shop, and he would make these sculptures, and weld them and grind them, and we'd make jewelry. We just like whatever you felt like doing, and getting messy and getting dirty and getting your hands in it. He had BB guns in the shop. We'd be shooting things while we're working and playing, so it was a good freedom, and that, now that I'm talking to you about it, it's like, that's probably the thing I value most on earth, is the ability to have my freedom.
That's awesome, man. So what happens when you're finished with school and you're ready to tackle life? Like, what do you do next?
Well, after Bay Ridge, living over there, we went into Bensonhurst when I went into my high school years, which was another craziness in itself. Where I live, the training film for the neighborhood was The Godfather, and
Okay.
I don't say that lightly. This was an Italian culture way of operating. Respect, and I've seen people get killed literally, for disrespecting somebody. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you had that kind of thing going on, and meanwhile I'm jumping on the B train. The B train went up downtown Brooklyn, and it went to Coney Island. Was where I was living, near Coney Island at the time in Bensonhurst, and I would go to Brooklyn Technical High School.
Okay.
In downtown Brooklyn, and that in itself was a whole experience, riding the train. And I remember riding the train with a lot of Hasidic Jews, and people with tattoos on their forearms. So it was like, in your face at that time, the survivors of Auschwitz, and the violence on the trains, being robbed at gunpoint, being robbed at knife point, on your way to school.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it was interesting.
So what happens after you get done with high school?
I was wondering what to do. I didn't really, it wasn't after, it was during high school, because I didn't really have any plan, any future, any real direction. And on top of it all, I didn't have any way to make money. When I was a kid, I worked in movie theaters. I did waiting tables, busing, whatever. And then it was like, okay, no future. My mom was working 3 jobs. We were living with my mother in Brooklyn. So the opportunity for the military seemed like a pretty good idea. And I actually went to join the Marines when I was 17. And my mother had a fit. I was living with my mother at the time. She had a fit. She's like, "There's no way I'm not signing those papers. You're not going." It was right after Vietnam, right before all the Gulf War and all that stuff. It was during the Iranian crisis, actually, is when I went. So she wouldn't sign the paperwork. So later on that winter, I was coming home from a football practice, and I met some guy dressed real sharp in his Air Force Blues and said, "Hey, you want a cup of coffee, kid?" I said, "Yeah," because I was freezing, standing on the corner, 86th Street in Brooklyn, waiting for a bus. So we went in there, and he gave me the whole spiel, and he did the comparison of the Marines versus the Air Force, being a foot soldier, and then what did they call them back then? Oversexed, underaged, underpaid teenage killers, So I ended up joining the Air Force, which my mom was cool with, and I left.
Wow. And so where did you get stationed? Like where'd you end up going?
So I was stationed in Colorado. I was stationed in Florida for a while in Tyndall Air Force Base. I was stationed in northern Michigan in the Upper Peninsula, K.I. Sawyer Air Force Base, which was future shock for a young boy from Brooklyn. Culture shock, I should say. Never seen anything like it. The town itself, the big town, which was probably 20 miles away, Marquette, from the base, had 30,000 people. I think I had more people in my neighborhood. And I was living in a small town called Gwinn, Michigan, with my wife and my son at the time. The population there was, I think, 7,000. So from being able to walk down to the corner to get a loaf of bread or a bagel or a pack of cigarettes or a beer, no. Small town, nobody knows. Oh, it was just crazy. Anyway, but I tried all the things I could do up there to entertain myself. Skiing and snowmobiling and ice fishing and whatever I could find, and racquetball and all kind of things. Nothing really got good to me, To having nothing to do as a young guy from the city was like crazy. But one thing that did occur at that time, which was really life-changing, I guess, for me, was I had a lieutenant who had studied theater somewhere. He approached me one day and he says, you're a pretty outgoing guy, and I'm doing this play. And I'm like, I never did a play or anything like that. He goes, yeah, but you would be good for it, And he was doing a production of Christmas Carol, and he was playing the lead role of Scrooge. And he's like, yeah, you want to play Bob Cratchit? So I was like, I don't really want to, but I'll try it because I really had nothing else to do of any interest, So here I am rehearsing and doing all this. And it was a lot of fun, the whole process, memorizing lines and scenes and all that. And what got me interested in acting at that time was we did one scene one day for a live audience. I think it was the first time we performed it. And there was a scene where my wife is just sewing, and she's crying, and she's talking about the color of the fabric is hurting her eyes after Tiny Tim dies, and a pretty innocuous piece, you would think, but the audience was literally crying. I was like sitting there going, wow, this is really creating an effect, which is for me the ultimate high, is creating an effect. It's like that's what I enjoy doing. That's why I do most of the things I do, because I want to create effect. I want to have some impact on this life. Yeah.
And so that planted the seed for at least for acting, right?
That planted the seed for the future, but I had no conceptual idea of how to continue with it after I got out of service. I was married, had a kid, had to find a job in New York, scramble around, hustling, waiting tables, driving car service, taxis, whatever I could do,
So how do you get to the point where you go into the police? Because I can kind of see how it makes sense, from the military going into police, but you're also this guy who's a little bit of a rebel and who's kind of outspoken and all over the place. So tell me about that. Like what made you want to go into the police force?
I didn't want to. My father suggested it because he saw I was having a really rough time, trying to find a good job and trying to take care of the family. He was like, you got these civil service tests are coming up, the fire department, sanitation department, the police department. And then I said, there's no way I'm going to walk behind a garbage truck. I'm not doing it. I said, I'm not running into burning buildings. Although as a police officer, we were there many times before the fire department pulling people out. Okay. So I took the police test. I did well on it. And I took the job, and it's funny because I remember my uncle having a conversation with me, my uncle in Brooklyn, John, and saying, what are you doing? what are you doing this for? You're not a hitter. You know, you're an artist. Why would you want to do this? Because it was like very, you know, and I guess I experience it to this day. Like people definitely categorize you by your job, you know, automatically, you know, until they get to know you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and I remember he was really upset. For me, it was like the practicality point. It was like, I don't have any prospects here, you know, and I didn't, you know, and back at that time, there was no internet or anything like that. So it was like, how do you get involved in these things? You know what I mean? I had no clue on even how to pursue any of it. And then you also had like the whole viewpoint of you're never going to make any money as an actor. You know what I mean?
So you had that, like that was a reality.
Well, that was, you know, what I was told many times. You know what I mean?
Right.
You got mouths to feed. You're like, all right, you got to do what you got to do, right? But the job was very easy for me, like too easy. And I mean, you know, we were a bunch of young, wild guys. I was working out in Staten Island in the beginning. Then I was working in Brooklyn as a sergeant. But I ended up loving the job. You know, I ended up loving that freedom, which is interesting, where you can go anywhere you want at any time. And there's very few things that afford you that. You know what I mean? You know, not even celebrity gives you that, where you can walk into anywhere. You know, nobody stops you. There's no restrictions. Driving, you know, driving like a maniac, you know, when you have to, and even when you don't. you know, there's no speed limits. There's no lights. There's no nothing. And as a young guy, you know, it's like, wow, this is great, you know. Anyway, I really ended up enjoying it. I loved chasing the bad guys. I loved, you know, the action. I was an adrenaline junkie. It was dangerous, you know. It was scary, you know, doing vertical patrols and housing projects by yourself. You know what I mean? Like knowing that it's like life and death every time you confront somebody, you know, fighting, rolling down stairs, being dragged by cars. I mean, crazy stuff. But, you know, and I'm looking at it now as I'm talking to you, it's like, that is being alive, man. You know, it's like when you're being shot at or whatever you're doing, you know, hot pursuits, however you want to say it, like, man, that's a feeling of being alive and in the moment. Do you know what I mean? Sure. Nothing else matters, like rolling around on the ground, fighting with somebody for your life, knowing, hey, man, this guy gets the best of me. This becomes a gunfight where I'm unarmed. You understand? You know, we got to know people, you know, and you got to watch people grow up, kids, you know, and families, and you were there mostly for the bad stuff. You know, it's like nobody's calling the police when they're having a party. Hey, come on over and have a sandwich or a cocktail, you know. It's like things are real bad. We need your help now. You know, who's dead, who's hurt, who's robbed, who's beat. You know what I mean? Yeah. Continuously, you know. So, but you got to meet people and get to know the people from the neighborhoods because you wanted to.
So how does like, because this all sounds actually pretty exciting and pretty awesome. Like, what happens to get you out of that era and into the next phase of your life? You know.
Well, a couple of things. I mean, I think a really big thing was getting involved with Scientology.
Okay.
And really changing my viewpoint on life a lot. Because, like, I always had this idea that what was going on around me just wasn't correct. You know, that people should be more friendly, that people should be able to communicate more, that people should care more, that they should be able to do what they want and have more freedoms and less restrictions and get out of the cookie cutter molds that they grow up in. Because, I mean, I have guys that I grew up with are still on the corner in Brooklyn, you know. Guys that never made it out. A lot of guys got killed or in prison, you know, or dead-end jobs and never did anything because that's all they knew. Like, you know, we were growing up, it was like, man, if you could get a city job, you'd be set. You know what I mean? Right. Like, you know, that was like what people were trying to tell you to aspire to. You know, it just never made sense to me. And I could remember sitting on the porch in Brooklyn, looking at the park across the street from me and the cars in front of me, when I was a kid, thinking, like, is this it? Like, is this all life is, you know? What really broke me out of it was me and my brother and my brother-in-law decided that we were going to all quit our jobs and open up a restaurant. I mean, originally it was going to be a bar up in upstate New York. And we had a warehouse picked out, and I had people advising me, and we were going to do this big, crazy bar. I was going to have airplanes flying around in it, basketball courts. It was going to be nuts.
Okay.
And then one day I said, man, I can't make a living selling liquor to kids. It was right next to a college. I knew I was going to make a ton of money because I had friends in that business that were making crazy money, you know, and I was like, no, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. And everybody was like, what do you mean? We're all set. We're going to sign the lease. We got the place. We got everything figured out. It's like, I'm not doing it. So my brother were like, all right, you know, I understand. And then a little bit later, my brother's, what if we do pizza? I'm like, okay, let's do pizza. And we ended up starting a pizza place called Goodfellas Pizza in Staten Island, New York. And probably within a year or so, we won the best pizza in America. When within a couple of years, we had Rudy Giuliani literally like as our spokesman on television, on the radio, talking about our vodka pie that we won the best in America with. And then we won the world's best pizza at the Pizza Expo after all the cook-offs. And it was like a rocket ride. Then we opened a big place in Brooklyn. Then we opened another place in Staten Island and Great Kills. Then we opened another place and another place. Then we started franchising. And it was
wait. So Mark, hold on a second. Like you're making it sound pretty easy here. Like what did you do? Like you had no experience, right? Like making pizza or
none
any
of us
of
had
this.
any experience.
So how do you do that? Like how do you go from not knowing how to make pizza at all or knowing anything about that business to being the winner of the world's best pizza award?
David, literally, we used to open up these books. There was these books called the Management Series by L. Ron Hubbard, these big green books. We didn't know what they were. We would open them up and we would read something and go, hey, let's try that. Let's make statistics for everybody, all the wait staff, and let's try this type of thing. Let's do surveys. I did surveys to come up with the name Goodfellas. I surveyed hundreds of people in Staten Island, all kind of pizza names to come up with a name, you know, and we all quit our jobs. So it was like do or die, you know, which was a little bit of stress, but I didn't really remember feeling that kind of stress on it, you know, because we knew it was going to work. So we were going, I was going door to door, introducing myself to the neighborhood, people in the neighborhood, knocking on the door, giving them a menu. We were stopping buses, handing out free pizza to cars, going to every restaurant. I was going to every single hairdressing places with all the ladies in there and bringing them free pizza, bringing a big pie and giving everybody menus and inviting them down. And, you know, me and my wife, well, my girlfriend, she was at the time, we would sit in the front window of the restaurant to try to make it look busy.
Oh, man.
We really didn't have a clue. We had a home refrigerator in the kitchen. All of us living in my one-bedroom condominium with bunk beds. My kids, my brother-in-law, my sister. I mean, it was nuts. And running out of money. We didn't have enough money to finish the place. We were all in there working, and we're running out of money for food. And every night we're eating a can of clam soup and a box of spaghetti. That's how bad it was getting. And we're like, we got to start selling some pizza and stuff, you know. And we didn't have recipes.
Oh, God.
There's a big bar across the street, and I have all these tables set up, and I'm inviting all the people in to try all the recipes we're making. We're trying all different doughs and sauces. Which one you like better? Which one you like better? Like, you know, but we were young, we were determined, and we didn't care, and it was exciting, man, you know. And then all of a sudden it started taking off, and we're doing interviews. Like if it was today, it would have been even crazier, you know, with the social media and all these things. We didn't have that, you know, but I remember doing an interview, NBC, Channel 4, A History of New York, and they're doing an episode on each borough, and the episode on Staten Island is me and Miss New York, and I'm like, wow, this is pretty interesting, and all the time I'm thinking, because I remember even when we won the contests, you know, in Vegas, and I remember Papa John coming up and congratulating me, Big Dave from Wendy's, the founder of Pizza Hut, and I'm like, looking around going, me? Us? I mean, I'm just a kid from Brooklyn, like, you know, and I love that line from Captain America, because that was like what I would say all the time. I'm just a kid from Brooklyn. I think a lot of it was just fun and games, and it attracted a lot of attention. And the people, the locals, loved us, and they would promote us all the time. Like a great example was Regis Philbin coming one day, and I'm standing on a chair, I'm hanging a picture or something, and I hear, it was before I opened, I hear this guy, "Hey, there's a guy gets some pizza in here. What time you open?" I'm like, "I'll open a little bit, have a seat, relax." "No, I got to get the pizza." And I turn around, and it's Regis Philbin, and he's got a bowling ball, and he's bowling in a restaurant, and it's actually, there's a clip on YouTube of it. It's pretty funny. And because somebody told him to come and check it out, and we used to do all kind of crazy fundraisers. I did one time for Jerry Lewis muscular dystrophy, where we handcuffed all the customers to the tables and the chairs, and all my cop friends, and they had to call people to bail them out with donations. And we ended up raising like $10,000 for the day.
Great idea.
Yeah. I got to do it live on the show, bring the check. It was great. I never pretended to know the answers, but I was always willing to look, and say, okay, I bet you something could be done, and that let's try, which is how I got into the acting world and how I did everything. It was like, let's at least give it a try.
We'll be right back to our interview in a minute, but first a quick message from our sponsor. Art Planet is a company I founded with the purpose of inspiring and empowering artists everywhere. At Art Planet, we make and sell products that are not only colorful and creative, but also fuel a movement towards combating the destruction of the world by focusing on the creation of a better one. Your purchases make this show and much more possible. Visit artplanet.co, that's artplanet.co, and explore our many products including clothing, creative tools, and artist resources. Use the code PODCAST at checkout and receive 20% off your first order. Thanks for your support. Now back to our interview.
Okay, so you had that seed that was planted from when you were in the Air Force, stationed in Michigan, I think it was, right?
Yeah.
And so a few years go by, and you're not really thinking you're going to be the next Robert De Niro or anything, right? But when do you start getting that acting bug and wanting to pursue that again? Tell me about that.
Well, I guess when I opened up the restaurant, I realized that I could make my own hours. I mean, even when I was a cop, actually, here's a couple of funny stories. Now that I'm looking back on it, I forget a lot of these things. So while I was a cop, actually, I remember I said, you know what, I'm just going to go find an acting school, and I'm just going to enroll, and that's it. I'm not even going to think about it. And I ended up going to HB Studios, Herbert Berghoff Studios on Bank Street in the Village, which was a great experience, and working with some great teachers like Bill Hickey, and Edith Meeks. And I'm sitting in these classrooms, and I'm willing to try anything, I know I don't know anything, but I'm willing to try anything. I mean, I remember doing Shakespeare as a kid from Brooklyn, Hamlet's soliloquy, to be or not to be, and laying on the floor practically naked, doing it on my back, and the teacher going what the hell are you doing? And I'm I don't know, just trying to get a different perspective, I started going to auditions, I started doing some acting, and I saw people that were there for years and years, and they would say, well, I'm not ready yet. I'm God, you're never going to be ready. You're a good actor. You're a good actor. I mean, there was one woman, this woman, Edwin Cockrell, I remember yesterday, when she would perform, you could hear a pin drop, man. She was just that captivating and incredible. Never went out on audition. Just studied for 10, 15 years, So I remember going on auditions and trying everything. And I was all right, I went to try to do speech therapy, to try to get rid of my Brooklyn accent, for months and months. And finally I gave up. I said, what, I'm not getting rid of it. I'm only going to be like this. Let me be a character, whatever. Let me just do what I got to do. So I started going on auditions. I started getting some parts. I remember one time running from Brooklyn as a sergeant in NYPD. After a 4 to 12, I got an audition for I think it was Theater for the New City. And I think it was an August Wilson play. It was a very heavy gay play. I mean, I wasn't right for the part, but I figured, you know what? You call me for an audition, I'm going. So I go. I'm waiting in the theater to do my audition, and I finally get up to 2 hours later. I get up on the stage, and the director goes, "Okay, what will you be doing?" I said, "I'm going to be doing a piece from American Buffalo." And the guy shakes his head, puts his head down, and throws his hand up at me, the back of his hand, and goes, "Phew, I hate Mamet. Go ahead." Like that.
Okay.
I was like, oh, brother. I was like, okay. I said, you know what? I said, I understand, but I think he has some poignant things to say on occasion. So, but I just took what he gave me and I let it rip. And I just went ballistic up on the stage, you know. And the guy stands up and starts applauding. And the director, and he's like, that was brilliant. And I didn't get any. I never got a call back. I never got anything, you know. 2 years later, the director calls me. He goes, Mr. Cosentino, I have to apologize for how I treated you, but we're doing an August Wilson play, and I want to give you the role. You don't have to audition if you'd like it. I was like, okay. So I go do this, and it's like this. It was this heavy gay thing, and I invited all my family and my partners, you know, cops and stuff. And this is in the East Village, and and after it's done, my partner comes up to me and goes, "Oh my God, partner, I couldn't take it." He says, "Don't invite me to anything anymore." but it was an experience, you know, and it was fantastic, you know. And I did a lot of that. I did a lot of these tiny little theaters and basement theaters and little black box theaters, and you know, helped produce a couple of shows on 42nd Street, you know, these little theaters. And I loved doing the live stuff. It was because you would get that feedback right away, you know. And in between, I would, you know, do some commercials or this and that, you know, but it was fun. You know, and then I tried to get into the Screen Actors Guild for years. I mean, literally for, I don't even know how many years it was, just working and trying to get in something that would get some screen credits, you know. Did a lot of NYU student films, Columbia University student films, whatever I could get my hands on, I would go do. And I would send out hundreds of pictures and resumes, spending all my money on it every week, and postage and calling and showing up. Finally, a friend of mine, he was a New York City detective. He was also, he ended up getting into a lot of trouble, mafia cop Louis Ippolito. But he was a friend of mine at the time. And he says, you know, there's a guy, he's auditioning for this movie. He's a young director. He's got a $1.2 million budget. It's not a lot, but blah, blah, blah. But it's a SAG film. Why don't you come and audition? I was like, you know, I just opened a restaurant. I'm like, he's like, yeah, but, so I said, okay, I'm coming. I just left everything, walked out of the restaurant, went up to Manhattan, and I auditioned. And the young guy, you know, he's probably in his 20s. He goes, that was great. He goes, you got the part. So I'm having this big party at the restaurant that night or 2 nights later. Invite all my friends and my family. We're having a party. I'm going to get a Screen Actors Guild. I'm going to do my first movie. I got a co-starring role, blah, blah, blah. And I get a call in the middle of the party from the director. Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were already in the Screen Actors Guild. I can't hire you. I want to apologize. I'm like, oh, my God. So that was, you know, we finished the party anyway, but that was depressing. So my buddy Louis says, why don't you come? Just come and hang out with me the next day. I was like, oh, I'm not in the mood to come and hang out. He goes, come on, you come and hang out in my trailer, you know, be my guest. I said, I don't really want. He said, come on. So I was like, all right. At the time, I was driving a 71 Chevy Nova, burgundy, Krager rims, you know, 350, dual exhaust, loud, showy. So I come ripping around the corner at the place and like spin the car in a circle. Everybody's looking, you know, on the set. The police come running over to me, like, you know, it's a whole scene. And then my buddy comes over. He goes, the director wanted to ask you a favor. Could we use your car in the movie? I'm like, no, he's not using my car in the movie. Tell him that. So then he comes back over. He goes, he said he'll let you be in the movie too. You could be an extra. You could drive it and be one of the cops in the background. I'm like, all right. So I'm driving the thing, and we're going into a house, and we're breaking down a door. And there's a guy there who was a cop in the NYPD. He's a technical advisor, and he's giving me a hard time. You have no lines here. You keep your mouth shut. Instead of trying to help me get a line so I could be in the thing and make a good friend, he's making an enemy. And I'm like, why? I'm like, all right, okay. So we do the scene. I'm taking a guy out of the bed. He's got a gun. He's got a girl with him, a penthouse body double, nude in the bed. And I walk out. I'm shaking my head. And the director's like, what's the matter? Well, that's not how it's done. He goes, what do you mean? I'm like, that's not how it's done. You know the guy's armed. You know he's a bad guy. You're not going to go in there all politely, sir, whatever. So he goes, all right, take it from the top. Do whatever you want. I go, really? He goes, yep. So kick the door in, screaming at the guy. So kick the door and the guy's laying in the bed. I'm like, get your fucking hands up. Show me your fucking hands. And you fucking cunt, give me your fucking hands right now. And they're both in the bed shaking, literally fucking shaking. You know, I had a 45, you know, it was a fake gun. They're literally shaking because I jumped up on top of the bed with them. And director's like, oh my God, that was incredible. Let's keep that, you know. And this guy who was the technical advisor smirking at me, you know, because I got a line, which is I'm going to be in the film and I'm going to get my SAG card. So now I'm in the Screen Actors Guild after all that, you know. And it's funny because that's how my life goes. It's like up and down and all around, but it's fun. I said, you know what? I'm going to go out to California and try to go for it. I go out there and I'm studying at the Beverly Hills Playhouse with Milton Casales and Jeffrey Tambor, and really exciting for me was LA because I'm in a class with people. There's people in the classroom that have their own television shows I'm sitting with, you know. But the thing I really got from them, which was really in line with me being from Brooklyn, I guess, and my growing up and my experiences as a cop and the restaurant business and everything else, was that you do whatever you think is right and you go for it with everything you have and there's no rules. So take it back. So this is what I'm doing, right? So I'm doing that and I'm going to every single casting agent in Hollywood, literally. I went to every single one with my headshot and resume, knocked on doors, had doors close to my face, told go away, went to every agent in California, everyone I could find. Knocked on every door, headshot, resume, can I audition? These are my reels, please, 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 you know. And finally I get an agent, and he won't send me out for anything. And I have all the sides. So I'm reading all these things, and I'm going, what about this? He's going, how do you know about this? I'm going, what about this? What about this? So then I go, and I get the call back for the lead of a feature film. I don't remember what the movie was. I think it was something with the person who ended up getting the role was Nicolas Cage, and I get the call back for the lead, and I'm sitting in there, and this guy calls me up, and he's pissed off at me. He's like, who do you think you are? I'm like, who do I think I am? How come you're not saying, hey, great job, let's get you the role? You know, and I didn't get the role, but I remember sitting there with the director going, man, the director's going, man, you're incredible. I wish I could use you. There's just something about you. We could use you. And that was very encouraging. I mean, that was worth the trip to LA by itself just to hear those words, you know, and to get that call back, you know. So then I was auditioning and got the lead in a play and all this stuff. But I got disgusted with California and I left. Okay. I got disgusted with the whole scene out there with the acting because it felt like to me, being from Brooklyn, it was like everybody was your best friend. They were very phony, you know, and like the majority of people I would meet until they kind of felt like there was nothing you could do for them. And then you had no importance, you know. And I remember even one director that I had met socially, and we became friends, I thought, would always say, yeah, we're going to do something, we're going to do something. And he would make a big scene in front of other people, how we were friends, and hug me and kiss me, and you're the best, and we're going to do something. And I would call him, he wouldn't answer me. And then I would see him again, oh, yeah, and then he wouldn't answer me. So one day I just called up. I was really disgusted. I said, hey, what crawls on his belly and talks out his ass? And the guy called me right back within 10 seconds. Who do you think you're talking to? Blah, blah, blah. I was like, hey, I'm talking to you. I said, where I come from, you don't treat people like this. You know, you don't like somebody, you don't want them around you, tell them. Don't jerk them around, you know? And I remember going back to my room and going to my wife, come on, we're packing, we're getting out of here. She's like, what? I'm all ready to move out of here. I'm like, no, we're going back to New York. I can't take it no more. God bless her. Always backing me up. You know, and then one day a guy says to me, hey, you know, the NYPD, there's a guy on that set there. He's the technical advisor. He was an NYPD detective. Why don't you go see if you could get in touch with him somehow? So I was like, okay, so let me try that. So now I'm making phone calls every day out to LA. I find out where and everything, and somehow, don't ask me how, because I can't remember how it all worked out. I end up getting through to 20th Century Fox, to the set, to the guy's office, and him on the phone. Bill Clark, his name is. And we start talking. I said, look, I was a New York City sergeant in the police department. I know you're a cop. I said, you know, I love the NYPD show. Dennis Franz is my hero. I would love to just get an audition. Well, you know, we shoot everything out in California. We only do the exterior shots in New York. Alexa Fogel, you know, she does the casting for that. I said, Alexa Fogel. I said, oh, I did a class with her years ago. I said, can I get an audition with her? He's like, you know what? Let me see what I could do. And next thing I know, I get an audition with her. They send the tape out there. He gets the tape. He goes, oh, yeah, you look good. we'll get you on the show. I'm like, wow, was it that easy? I mean, this wasn't like in 2 minutes, but this was like a lot of phone calls and running around. Anyway, so the season's going by, and I'm calling every week. Yeah, we're going to get you on, Then it's getting towards the end of the season. I'm like, oh, man, there's only a few weeks left, you know? And he says to me, well, you know, Mark, we have our stable of actors out here. There's a lot of local guys. There's only so many people per episode. And I get off the phone, and I'm like really depressed. I'm like, oh, my God, this isn't going to happen, you know? And I'm not a guy to get depressed or upset, you know? So 1 second later, I'm like, okay, that's it. I know what I'm going to do. So I go home, and I'm packing my bag, and my wife is looking at me. And she's like, what are you doing? I said, well, I bought a ticket. I'm going to L.A., and I'm not coming back till I get on this TV show. She starts crying. She's like, what do you mean? I says, it's not going to be that long. Just let me go. I got to go. I'm leaving tonight. I'll talk to you soon. Oh, so I end up in California, and I'm at Pico Boulevard. I don't even know where it is. Somehow I get there. I'm on Pico Boulevard, across the street from 20th Century Fox. And all I have with me is my little briefcase with some pictures of pizza in it and stuff like that, and some articles from, you know, winning the world's best pizza and all this nonsense from the restaurant, which I liked anyway. So I'm I go in and I see a bar, and I'm like, all right, let me go in and get a bar. I'm sitting in the bar. Let me get a cocktail. I'm having myself a margarita, and I'm sitting there. And I remember like yesterday, I'm sitting there going, okay, now what, wise guy? What are you going to do? And I'm like, I had no plan, David. I had no plan. So I go, all right, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go up there. You're going to tell Bill you're visiting. You just want to stop by and say hello. Take it from there. Get in the door. I'm like, okay. So I go to the guardhouse. I tell the guy, hey, Marc Cosentino, could you tell Bill Clark I'm in from New York. I'm just passing through. I want to give him a quick hello. Next thing I know, they send a car out. They pick me up. They bring me to the set. And here I am standing with my hero, Dennis Franz from Hill Street Blues, which was my favorite show. Jimmy Smits and Kim Delaney and Bill Clark and Mark Tinker, the director, Mary Tyler Moore's son, and I'm hanging out on the set, and I'm like, wow, okay, I'm here. So here's the lesson for your listeners, man. Just go for it. Worst thing that can happen is you lose miserably. A couple days later, I just keep showing up, David. I'm not invited. I just keep showing up. I'm like a fly on the wall. I'm just hanging out, you know? And one day, Bill comes up to me. He goes, look, I got you an audition. I can't do nothing for you when you're in there, but I got you an audition. I was like, wow, okay, thank you. So I go in, this young girl, casting agent. I audition for her. She goes, you've done this before? I said, yeah. She goes, you got the part. I was out in California 10 days, and I was a co-star on NYPD Blue with my hero, Dennis Franz.
Wow.
Unbelievable. Like, I still don't believe that story when I tell it myself. My friends. So I do that. I come home, and it aired like right away. It was like, I guess it was towards the end of the season or something, because it aired right away. And my friends are calling me up, Cosentino! You know, all my guys, my cop friends. I'm laying in bed with my wife. Next thing I know, I see you on the television, you know. And I'm laughing, and I'm like really happy because I came home in triumph. You know what I mean? It was like Caesar returning. It was like triumph. And I know every time, and this is the truth, David, like when I quit my job as a sergeant in NYPD, people thought I was nuts. People came from everywhere to try to talk me out of it. All the big brass, the chiefs, they all came sitting down in the restaurant. What are you doing? You got a whole career ahead of you. You could go anywhere you want in this job. You're a smart guy. You can do this. You can do that. And I was like, nobody offered me nothing when I was working in the ghetto. Now that I'm leaving, you want me to stay? You know? But I remember in the back of my mind thinking a little bit, you know, and when you're young, you probably don't think it as much, and you're like, boy, this could be real bad. I could fail miserably and lose everything, sure. Right? Mm-hmm. You know, and that was the same with the restaurant. That was the same with the acting career. It was the same with everything I did. Was like, you know what? I got nothing to lose, because if I don't do it, I got nothing. So why not try? What's the worst they could do? Take away my birthday? I don't think so, you know?
I think everybody that's listening can kind of tell that, you know, if you want to do something, you're going to do it. So I'm really curious, because you can do anything you want to do, what do you have planned for the future?
Wow, man. You know, I never really, I hate to tell you this. It's probably my shortcoming. I never really make future plans down the road. I'm very spur of the moment, you know, okay. which is scary to some people if they're in my environment, you know, because they're like, damn, guy just changed direction 100%. I mean, you know, I got my drag race car right now, my 1981 Camaro called Relentless. You know, we have the brick oven company I'm working on. We're in 47 states now around the country. I'm working on a film based on with a friend of mine, Dan Robertson, based on the book Routine Patrol. We already have part of the musical score for it. To me, it's an adventure, and it's like I'm not really like going, okay, good, man, I'm going to put this solidly there for the future. I think it's more like I'm just getting to the point in my life where I have the ability to come and go as I please and do what I want. So it's like I'm looking for that next thing that's going to motivate me. But the acting world it's always there in the background. If something good comes along. I mean, I did a little bit part with Leonardo DiCaprio in the film The Wolf of Wall Street, where I spent the day throwing him on the ground and handcuffing him at Martin Scorsese's direction. And it always goes back to when I was a kid. I had mentioned this to you in the past, but my mom being upset with coloring books and drawing in the lines, and she always felt that was a very hampering thing for anybody artistically talented, or just like a viewpoint of like, don't draw in the lines. You don't when I would color, people would get upset because there'd be a picture of a car there, and next thing you know, I have a picture of a plane flying by, and and you're like, why aren't you coloring in the lines and doing nice? I'm like, because that's not what we do,
I love that, man. Well, listen, Mark, at the end of every episode, I always ask this question of my guests, and sometimes it's a little difficult for people to pick just one, but here's the question. What one work of art, it could be a painting, a book, an album, a song, a film, etc., would you recommend every single person on earth go check out?
Well, my favorite book is called Illusions by Richard Bach, The Adventures of a Modern Day Messiah. There's a parable in it that I always tell people when they're in trouble and they're trying to decide, should I go for it or not, especially with actors, artists, people that are creative or trying to do a business. And it goes like this. Once upon a time, there were a group of little fishes that used to live clinging to the bottom of the rocks. And one day, one of the fishes said, hey, what if I let go and see what happens? And all the other fish around him said, no, this is what we do. You have to stay here, cling to the bottom. This is how we live our lives. And the little fish thought about it and thought about it. One day he said, what the heck? And he let go, And even though they told him he would be thrashed around and they told him he'd be crushed on the rocks and tumbled about, he was tumbled about and thrashed about. And all of a sudden, he was free. And he was swimming free in the river. And he came upon another little group of fishes clinging to the rocks like he used to do. And they looked up and someone said, behold, the Messiah.
That's beautiful.
And that's the truth. Every one of us has the ability to let it go and create and make something happen that all the other people around will go, wow.
That's a great answer, man. I love that choice. So listen, if people want to find out more about Marc Cosentino, if they want to, dive into your universe, where can they go to get more information, find out more about you, follow you on social media and all of that?
Yeah, I have a Facebook page. I have a Twitter page, Marc Cosentino. I have a website called routinepatrol.com, which talks about my book and my coffee and a little bit of background of me. But yeah, I'm available. I'm willing to talk to people, and I love to help motivate people if I can.
Well, I got to thank you, man. I'm sure that you've motivated a lot of people with this interview, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time to share these stories. And if there's anybody listening that wants to make, or let's say if there's anybody listening that wants to create a big effect in a movie or otherwise, contact Marc Cosentino because he's the guy.
Hey, thank you. It's my pleasure, David. Make me feel important.
Well, you are, man. Join us next time with our next guest, and thanks for listening, guys.
Are you a super artist? Want to be one? We've got an awesome opportunity for you to tell the world and win something cool at the same time. enter our Super Artist Selfie Contest for a chance to win our popular artist training course, Super Artist Bootcamp. Super Artist Bootcamp has 8 modules with 24 videos teaching artists how to build confidence, how to promote and sell their work, and how to achieve a creative life. We pick a new winner every week, and all you have to do to enter is take a selfie of yourself holding a piece of paper or sign that says Super Artist and post it on Instagram with the hashtag SuperArtist. Good luck and keep creating. It's time for some art trivia. Last episode, we asked what famous artist was at the top of the list of suspects for stealing the Mona Lisa back in 1911. It was none other than Pablo Picasso. Here's a new question. What Hollywood actor signed his name for the very last time on a speeding ticket just before his death in 1955? Think you know the answer? Join us next episode to find out. Thanks for listening to this episode of Super Artist with David Carus. This podcast is recorded at Art Planet Studio in Taylor, Texas, in the historic McCrory Timmerman Building. All of the music in today's episode was produced by Ethergun. You can find his music on iTunes, SoundCloud, and pretty much anywhere online. If you enjoy listening to our podcast, please hit that subscribe button and share this episode with your friends. We need more art and artists in the world, and your support of our show helps make that happen. Hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you in the future.